You know what's hard? Staying calm when somebody is rude to you. It feels personal, it feels unfair, and everything in you wants to fire back with something twice as sharp. But here's the problem. The second you do that, you're not in control anymore. They are. So how do you respond? First, don't match tone, match control. If they come in hot, you don't have to. Think of it like a thermostat versus a thermometer. A thermometer just reacts to the room. A thermostat sets the temperature. You want to be the thermostat. Second, silence is underrated. When somebody says something rude, a pause is powerful. It gives you space to choose your words, and it makes them feel the weight of what they just said. 9 times 10, the silence says more than any comeback. Third, ask a question. Rudeness often collapses under curiosity. Somebody snaps at you. You can respond with, "What makes you say that?" or "Help me understand what you mean." Now, instead of a fight, you've started a conversation they may not have been ready for. And finally, remember, not every rude comment deserves your energy. Sometimes the best response is no response. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Here's the bottom line. Responding to rudeness isn't about winning, it's about protecting your peace. If you stay calm, stay curious, and stay in control, their words don't get to own you. Don't match tone, match control. That's the hardest thing to do when you're face with someone who decides to throw rudeness your way. Human instinct says if they're loud, you get louder. If they're sharp, you get sharper. If they cut, you cut deeper. And in the moment, it feels justified. It feels like you're standing up for yourself. But what really happens is you've given them control over your emotions, your words, and even the direction of the conversation. You let their tone dictate yours. Think of it like this: tone is contagious. If someone walks into a room frustrated, you can feel it. Their words come out clipped, their body language is tense, and the temperature of the whole interaction rises. The natural reaction is to meet them at that level, but when you do that, you're no longer steering the exchange. They are. You've let their mood, their energy, and their frustration set the rules of engagement, and that's not where you want to be. Matching control means you take ownership of how you show up, regardless of how they do. It's like refusing to play tug of war. Even when they hand you the rope, they can yank, pull, and strain, but if you never grab hold, you never get dragged into the mud. Control doesn't mean you're passive, and it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you choose to respond with intention instead of reaction. Picture a rude coworker who throws a sarcastic jab in a meeting. Maybe they say something like, "Oh, I guess you're the expert now." The quick, reactive instinct is to bite back, "Well, at least I'm doing something useful." That feels satisfying for about half a second. But then you've escalated the situation. Now the meeting isn't about the topic. It's about the two of you sparring. Instead, matching control might sound like calmly addressing the comment, "I'm just trying to contribute. Let's get back to the point." Your tone stays steady. Their jab bounces off. You didn't match their sarcasm. You matched your own standard of composure. Control is also about body language. If someone raises their voice, the temptation is to raise yours right back. But control looks like keeping your posture relaxed, your voice steady, and your words measured. It communicates confidence without aggression. It shows that you're not rattled even if on the inside you feel the sting. The truth is, people often use rudeness to provoke a reaction. If they succeed in getting you heated, they've won. If they fail because you stayed calm, they're left with their own frustration echoing back at them. It helps to think of yourself as a thermostat instead of a thermometer. A thermometer just reacts. It goes up if it's hot, down if it's cold, no control. A thermostat, on the other hand, sets the temperature. It regulates the environment. When someone comes at you with a rude tone, you don't have to rise with their heat. You get to set the tone of calm, respect, and control. And that steadiness can pull the whole conversation back down to a manageable level. Another way to look at it is through perspective. If you match someone's rude tone, you're seeing the situation through their lens. Their bad day becomes your bad moment. But when you match control instead, you put a buffer between their emotions and yours. You acknowledge their words without absorbing their energy. You say with your demeanor, "I hear you, but I'm not letting you steer me." Matching control also has ripple effects beyond that single moment. People remember how you handled yourself under pressure. If you're the one in the room who doesn't get shaken by rudeness, your credibility grows. Colleagues, friends, and even strangers notice when you keep your composure. It communicates maturity, steadiness, and self-respect. It says, I value my peace more than I value winning a quick verbal battle. Silence is more powerful than a comeback. When someone hits you with a rude comment, your brain immediately starts searching for the perfect response. That one-liner that shuts them down, the witty remark that makes everyone else laugh, the verbal punch that makes them regret ever saying a word. But here's the problem. Comebacks usually serve you more than they solve the situation. They make you feel good for a moment, but they rarely de-escalate, and they almost always drag you into the same negative energy you were trying to avoid. Silence, on the other hand, doesn't just avoid escalation. It shifts the balance of power. Most people aren't used to silence. In a world where conversations move fast, pauses feel uncomfortable. When someone is rude, they're expecting one of two things: either you crumble or you fight back. Silence gives them neither. It's like holding up a mirror and letting them see themselves without interference. That pause creates space, and in that space, their words echo back louder than they intended. Often, people realize just how unnecessary or cutting their comment was when it hangs in the air without your reaction to soften it. Take an everyday example. Someone at work makes a dismissive remark like, "Wow, I didn't think you'd get that right." If you immediately clap back, the energy escalates. If you defend yourself, it looks like they struck a nerve. But if you just look at them, stay calm, and say nothing for a few beats, the weight of their words starts to settle. That silence is a pressure they didn't anticipate. They were expecting pushback or emotion. What they weren't expecting was stillness. Silence also buys you time. When emotions are high, words can come out fast and sharp, often before you've even processed what you want to say. That's when regret shows up later. I shouldn't have said that, or I wish I handled that differently. A pause creates a buffer. It lets your rational brain catch up to your emotional one. It lets you choose whether the moment deserves a response at all, and if it does, what kind of response serves you best? The silence becomes your filter. Think about the way silence works in other areas of life. In music, the pause between notes is just as important as the notes themselves. It gives shape, it gives rhythm, it gives meaning. In conversations, silence functions the same way. It emphasizes, it punctuates, it turns a simple pause into a statement. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes the quiet is louder than anything you could say. Silence also communicates confidence. People who are secure in themselves don't feel the need to defend every jab or answer every insult. They know their value isn't tied to the opinions flying at them. When you can absorb a rude comment with nothing but calm stillness, it shows that you're not threatened. That unspoken confidence can disarm the other person more than any clever retort could. There's also a subtle psychological effect at play. Humans don't like unresolved tension. If someone says something rude and you don't bite, they're often left with the discomfort of their own words. That discomfort can be a teacher. They may reflect on how they came across, or at the very least, think twice before trying it again. Silence doesn't guarantee self-awareness in others, but it creates the possibility. And that's more productive than a heated back and forth. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It doesn't mean you're letting people walk over you. It means you're choosing not to let every rude remark rent space in your mind. It means you value composure over confrontation. It means you're willing to let a pause do the heavy lifting that words often can't. Replace conflict with curiosity. That's a skill that sounds simple, but takes real discipline to practice. When someone comes at you with a rude comment, the instinct is to armor up. You want to defend yourself, protect your dignity, or push back so they know you're not an easy target. But what if, instead of meeting rudeness with resistance, you turned it into an opportunity to understand? Curiosity can flip the script. It shifts the dynamic from a standoff to a dialogue, and it forces the other person to explain themselves in a way they probably weren't planning to. Imagine someone rolls their eyes in a meeting and says, "That's a terrible idea." The usual response might be defensive. "Well, at least I'm contributing," or "Do you have a better one?" But curiosity would sound different. "What makes you say that?" Or "Can you help me understand your concern?" Suddenly, you've moved the conversation from conflict to explanation. You're not feeding the fire. They are now responsible for adding clarity to their criticism. The power dynamic changes because you're not playing the game of insult for insult. You've redirected it into substance. Curiosity works because it lowers defenses. A question is harder to fight against than a comeback. If someone expects you to be combative and instead you lean in with genuine interest, they're caught off guard. It interrupts their script. their rude comment loses momentum because now it has to stand on its own, backed by reasoning instead of emotion. And if there is no reasoning behind it, your question exposes that without you ever having to raise your voice, there's another layer to curiosity. It buys you time. When you ask a question instead of snapping back, you create space for the heat of the moment to cool down. You give yourself a second to gather your thoughts and assess whether this is a battle worth engaging in. At the same time, you shift the focus onto them. They have to do the talking. They have to explain. That space can turn the temperature of the entire interaction down a notch. Curiosity doesn't mean agreeing with them, and it doesn't mean excusing rudeness. It simply means refusing to let rudeness drag you straight into conflict. It's the difference between throwing fuel on a fire and redirecting the flames into a fireplace where it can actually be useful. You're guiding the energy instead of resisting it. Think of curiosity as disarming without aggression. A sarcastic remark like, "Wow, you think you're really smart, don't you?" could be met with, "That's interesting. Why does it come across that way to you?" Now, instead of two people locked in hostility, you've reframed the interaction. You've made them accountable for their words. And often, when someone has to explain a rude comment out loud, it doesn't sound as strong as it did in their head. Curiosity also communicates composure. Asking questions instead of arguing signals that you're steady, confident, and not easily thrown off balance. It shows you're more interested in understanding than in sparring. And that kind of steadiness has ripple effects. It models a different way of handling tension. Other people notice when someone refuses to escalate and instead redirects the tone of the conversation. It's a quiet kind of influence that doesn't demand attention but earns respect. On a deeper level, curiosity can sometimes reveal what's really going on underneath the rudeness. Many rude comments come from stress, insecurity, or frustration that has nothing to do with you. By asking questions, you might uncover the root cause. Maybe the person isn't actually upset with your idea. They're overwhelmed by deadlines. Maybe their sarcasm isn't about you. It's about the pressure they're under. Curiosity doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it can expose the humanity behind it. And when you see the humanity, it becomes easier not to take the rudeness personally. Not every rude comment deserves your energy. That's something a lot of people struggle with because we're wired to defend ourselves when we feel attacked. The instinct is to respond, to correct, to prove a point, to show we're not weak. But here's the truth. Every time you respond to rudeness, you're spending something valuable, your time, your focus, and your peace of mind. And not all of those comments are worth the cost. Think of your energy like currency. You only get so much of it each day, and you spend it in dozens of ways. On work, on relationships, on goals, on problems that actually matter. When a rude comment comes flying your way, you're faced with a choice. Do you invest that energy into someone else's negativity, or do you save it for something that actually benefits you? Too often, people spend generously on conflict but go broke on peace. Some rude comments are designed to provoke. The person saying them wants to pull you into their storm. Maybe they're having a bad day, maybe they're insecure, or maybe they thrive on drama. If you take the bait, you've given them what they wanted, your attention, your frustration, your reaction. But when you ignore it, when you don't hand over that energy, you starve the drama. You take away the reward. And in many cases, the behavior dies on its own because it doesn't get fed. There's power in walking away, in letting silence do the talking, in refusing to dignify pettiness with a response. That doesn't mean you let people disrespect you, but it does mean you're selective. You ask yourself, does this comment actually impact me? Does it affect my work, my reputation, my relationships? Or is it just noise? If it's noise, it doesn't deserve a reply. Not everything thrown at you has to be caught. Consider social media. The comments section is a breeding ground for rudeness. Strangers with no context of your life feel bold enough to say things they'd never say to your face. If you answered every rude comment online, you'd spend your whole day trapped in arguments with people you'll never meet. The smartest people don't waste their energy there. They understand that not all voices matter equally, and not every opinion needs to be acknowledged. The same principle applies in real life. Just because someone says something doesn't mean it automatically requires your engagement. Choosing not to respond can also protect your emotional health. Rude comments can stick in your mind, replaying hours later if you let them. But when you train yourself to dismiss them quickly, you reduce their lifespan. You shrink their importance. It's like deciding not to pick up a heavy weight someone tries to hand you. If you don't grab it, it never becomes yours to carry. Another angle is perspective. Ask yourself, will this rude comment matter tomorrow? Next week? A year from now? Most of the time, the answer is no. But in the moment, it feels urgent, like you have to deal with it right now. Stepping back and seeing the bigger picture helps you realize that ignoring it doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. It shows you know the difference between battles worth fighting and distractions not worth touching. It also communicates self-respect. People notice when you don't let every little jab throw you off balance. They see that you don't hand over your peace so easily. That kind of restraint earns more respect than snapping back ever could. You send a message that your time and energy are valuable, and you won't waste them on negativity that doesn't move you forward. There's freedom in letting go, in deciding that not all words deserve space in your head or your heart. The more you practice conserving your energy, the more you'll realize how much lighter life feels when you're not constantly dragged into conflicts that don't matter.